cold, open 0 o'clock to 0:45. On the morning of August 5, 2009, federal agents drove down Peachtree City Road in Fayette County, Georgia. They were not rushing. They already knew where he was. Inside a modest office building attached to a megachurch, a man named Alan Stanford was not there. He had not been there for months. What the agents found instead were filing cabinets stuffed with fake certificates, binders full of names, ordinary people, retirees, widows, teachers. Every single one of them had handed their savings to a man they trusted completely. The total, $7.2 billion, gone, and the man who took it had been doing it for nearly 20 years. Setup 0:45 to 3 o'clock. To understand Alan Stanford, you have to understand what he wanted people to see. He wanted them to see a titan. Robert Allen Stanford was born on March 24, 1950, in Mexia, Texas, a small town. Unremarkable. His family had some money, lost most of it, and Alan grew up watching that sting. He decided very early that he would never feel that way again. By the mid-1980s, he was selling real estate in Texas. Struggling. A company he ran went bankrupt in 1984. Most people would have pivoted quietly. Stanford pivoted loudly. He rebranded himself entirely and moved to the Caribbean island of Montserrat to start a bank. That bank failed too. Regulators shut it down. But Stanford had learned something from that failure. He had learned how offshore banking worked. He had learned that distance from American regulators was not a liability. It was a product. In 1986, he moved to Antigua. He registered Stanford International Bank under Antiguan law. He befriended politicians. He donated to cricket tournaments. He eventually spent $100 million to revive the Stanford 2020's cricket competition, which aired internationally. His face was everywhere. He dressed like old money. He flew private. He had a yacht named Sea Eagle that stretched 112 feet. He received an honorary knighthood from Antigua in 2006 and insisted that people call him Sir Alan. He was not a banker. He was a performance. And for 20 years, almost everyone watched the performance and forgot to ask what was behind the curtain. The turn, 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock. The product Stanford International Bank sold was simple: certificates of deposit, known as CDs. A normal CD from a normal American bank in the 1990s might return 4 or 5% annually, safe, boring, federally insured. Stanford CDs returned 10, 11, sometimes 15%, year after year after year. He told investors his team of analysts had developed a proprietary investment strategy, unique, unbeatable, classified. He said the portfolio was worth billions and was managed by a team of 20 analysts in a secret location. There were no analysts. There was no portfolio. The money from new investors was used to pay the promised returns to earlier investors. Every dollar that came in was already spoken for. It was a textbook Ponzi structure, dressed in linen trousers and flown first class. By the early 1990s, Stanford was pulling in hundreds of millions in deposits. By 2008, the total outstanding certificates exceeded $7.2 billion. His client base stretched across the United States, Latin America, Venezuela, Ecuador, Mexico, and the UK. More than 30,000 accounts in total. The selling network was vast. Stanford Financial Group operated out of a Houston headquarters on Galleria Boulevard. It employed over 1,500 financial advisors across 130 offices. These advisors were not all in on the scheme. Many were true believers. They had seen the returns. They had clients who were happy. They collected commissions. They did not ask the questions they should have asked. One woman, who worked as an advisor in Miami, later told investigators she had a sick feeling every time she sold a CD. She said it felt like selling something she could not fully explain. She sold them anyway, millions of dollars worth. The red flags were not hidden. They were just ignored. In 1997, a financial analyst named Alex Dalmody looked at Stanford's reported returns and compared them to global market conditions. He published a piece in a Venezuelan financial magazine called Veneconomy. The title was roughly translated as DuckTales, a reference to a cartoon about a greedy duck swimming in gold coins. He called Stanford's numbers impossible. The article went nowhere. The SEC had been receiving tips and complaints about Stanford as early as 1997, a full 12 years before his arrest. An internal SEC investigation began in 2002. It went dormant. It was reassigned. It went dormant again. The Fort Worth regional office of the SEC investigated and concluded there was fraud. Their conclusions were shelved by supervisors who, according to a later Inspector General report, were actively trying to secure future employment at Stanford-connected firms. Let that settle. The government's own watchdogs were looking the other way because they wanted jobs. Meanwhile, Stanford flew from island to island on one of his private jets. He owned 3. He maintained residences in Houston, Miami, St. Croix, and Antigua. His staff was instructed to refer to him as Sir Alan at all times. In 2008, the world cracked open. Lehman Brothers collapsed in September. The global financial system was in free fall. Investors everywhere began calling in redemptions. Stanford had to pay, and for the first time, there was not enough new money coming in to cover what was going out. He began stalling. He changed redemption policies. He delayed wire transfers. He sent letters to clients explaining that the global crisis had made liquidity temporarily difficult. He bought himself a few more months. But the dam was cracking. The collapse. 8 o'clock to 13 o'clock. On February 17th, 2009, the Securities and Exchange Commission finally filed an emergency action against Alan Stanford and his companies. The complaint described a massive ongoing fraud. The SEC alleged Stanford had fabricated returns, invented an investment portfolio that did not exist, and used client funds for personal expenses on a scale that was almost cartoonish in its excess. The documents showed $1.6 billion in personal loans Stanford had written to himself from the bank. Not loans with repayment plans, just transfers. Money moved from depositor accounts to Alan Stanford's personal spending. He spent it on his yachts, on his jets, on real estate in Antigua, on the cricket tournaments, on a private island, on $10,000 bottles of wine, on a collection of rare coins, on women, on whatever he wanted whenever he wanted it. The certificate holders, the widows and retirees and small business owners who had handed him their life savings received a letter. It told them their accounts were frozen pending investigation. A woman named Layla Weidler, a former Stanford financial advisor in Louisiana, had actually tried to warn people. In 2003, she wrote a formal letter to regulators describing exactly what she believed was happening. She was fired by Stanford in 2003 after raising internal concerns. She wrote to the SEC. She wrote to FINRA. Nobody called back. By 2009, she was watching the news and feeling a specific kind of horror that only comes from being right about something terrible. When the fraud collapsed, the victims were not hedge funds. They were not banks. They were people. James Davis, Stanford's CFO and his college roommate from Baylor University, was the first to break. Davis had been at Stanford's side since the beginning. He knew everything. He had helped construct the lie, maintain the fake financial statements, signed off on fabricated reports that were shown to regulators and auditors. On August 27, 2009, Davis pleaded guilty to 3 counts of fraud and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. He wept in court. He was wearing a gray suit that had not been pressed. The auditor for Stanford International Bank was a firm called Cass, Hewlett & Company. It operated from a small office in Antigua staffed by a single accountant named Cass. Hewlett one man, auditing a supposed $7.2 billion portfolio. His certifications were later questioned and his credentials found to be, at best, irregular. Regulators in Antigua had been told for years that everything was fine. Stanford had donated money to government officials. He had funded infrastructure. He had made himself indispensable to an entire island economy. The oversight was not merely absent, it had been purchased. Thousands of miles away, in Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador, middle-class families were discovering that the retirement funds they had saved for decades existed only on paper. A retired school teacher in Caracas named Maria Gonzalez had deposited her entire $140,000 pension into Stanford CDs on the advice of a local financial advisor who had no idea the product was fraudulent. She lost everything. She was 67 years old. In Houston, Stanford's employees arrived at work on February 17th to find federal agents in the lobby. The SEC's civil action was followed immediately by asset freezes. Employees were told to go home. Many of them had their own retirement savings inside Stanford plans. They lost those too. Stanford himself had not been in the office. He was at his girlfriend's home in Virginia. When news of the SEC filing broke, he did not immediately surrender. He moved. He contacted lawyers. He called associates. On June 18, 2009, 4 months after the civil filing, federal agents finally located Alan Stanford on a rural road outside Fredericksburg, Virginia. He was served with criminal charges. He was arrested without incident. He did not run. He did not have anywhere left to go. He was charged with 21 counts of fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and money laundering. The aftermath, 13 o'clock to 16 o'clock. The trial of Alan Stanford began on January 23, 2012, in a federal courtroom in Houston, Texas. By then, Stanford was not the man who had once demanded to be called sir. He had been in federal detention since 2009. In September 2009, he was beaten severely by another inmate at a federal detention center in Conroe, Texas. The assault left him with a broken jaw, fractured facial bones, and nerve damage in his hands. He claimed afterward that he had no memory of the years of fraud. His lawyers requested a competency evaluation. The court-appointed psychiatrist concluded it was likely the result of addiction to medication prescribed during detention, not genuine amnesia. He was found competent to stand trial. He showed up to court in a blue prison-issued jumpsuit because his assets had been frozen and he could not afford civilian clothes. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On March 6, 2012, Alan Stanford was found guilty on 13 of 14 counts. On June 14, 2012, Judge David Hittner sentenced him to 110 years in federal prison. He is currently housed at a federal correctional institution in Coleman, Florida. He is 74 years old. He will die there. James Davis, the CFO who cooperated, received a 5-year sentence, which was reduced to 3 years for cooperation. He was released and returned to a quiet life. His testimony was the spine of the prosecution. The Stanford receiver, Ralph Janvey, was appointed to recover whatever assets remained. Over years of litigation, investigators identified and seized yachts, real estate, aircraft, and personal property. The total recovered by 2020 was approximately $500 million out of $7.2 billion stolen, 7 cents on the dollar. The Securities Investor Protection Corporation, which typically covers victims of broker fraud, refused to pay Stanford victims, ruling that the CDs were not covered securities under the statute. Years of legal battles followed. The victims fought in court, in Congress, everywhere they could. Some received partial payments through the receivership. Most received a fraction of what they lost. A number of elderly victims died waiting. Layla Weidler testified before Congress about her attempts to warn regulators. Her story became part of the broader investigation into the SEC's failures. The Inspector General's 2010 report confirmed that the SEC's Fort Worth office had investigated Stanford at least 4 separate times between 1997 and 2009 and failed to pursue formal action each time. Career implications and desire to leave for private sector roles were listed as contributing factors. 3 SEC officials involved in the failed investigations went on to take jobs at firms with connections to the Stanford world. One later returned the compensation. In Antigua, the fallout was economic as well as personal. Stanford had employed hundreds of Antiguans directly and had influenced the island's economy for decades. When the empire collapsed, properties he owned sat vacant. A housing development he had promised to build never broke ground. The land sat empty. The 30,000 victims have never made each other whole. They never will. Closing reflection, 16 o'clock to 17 o'clock. Here is what stays with you about Alan Stanford. It was not the scale. Madoff was larger. Others were more sophisticated. What stays with you is the duration. 20 years. 2 decades of ordinary people, ordinary families, making ordinary financial decisions, trusting a man who had been empty from the very start. While regulators filed and shelved, while auditors signed names to documents they could not have verified, while advisors looked at numbers that did not make sense and sold the product anyway because the commission cleared. The machinery that should have stopped Alan Stanford saw him clearly and looked away.
Every single system designed to protect those 30,000 people failed them, and the man at the center of it all sat in a Caribbean office, signing certificates with a pen that cost more than most of his victims earned in a month, calling himself Sir. He is 74 now, in a cell in Florida. The Sea Eagle was auctioned. The jets are gone. The island properties were seized and sold. But the $6.7 billion they never recovered is somewhere. Changed hands, dissolved into real estate and wire transfers and cash, a number on a spreadsheet that stopped making sense a long time ago. That money did not disappear. It just left the people it was taken from, and it never came back.